welcome everyone to the Tuesday, September 23rd afternoon work session. This is Chair Catherine Harrington. I'm joined in the room by Vice Chair Pam Trees, Commissioner Jason Snyder. On Zoom, Commissioner Jerry Willey. Thank you for joining us. And we don't have Commissioner Nafisa Fai. So our first item on the agenda is the Audit Committee new member appointments. Welcome.
Good afternoon, board and chair. Today we just have a couple of recommendations for our audit committee that's coming up. We have just a little bit about the audit committee. There's 5 members, not more than 9. So these 2 will bring us to a total of 9. Commissioner Snyder serves on the board. And so we have 2 applicants today. The majority of the applicants should have knowledge of accounting and auditing practices and professional experience in auditing, accounting, and finance. And many of these, most every one of our representatives do. The audit committee meets twice a year, once after the start of the fiscal year and prior to the start of field work in October, which we're getting ready to meet this week. And the second meeting is after the annual comprehensive financial report, which is issued to the board prior to issued in the board and accepting of the financial statements. We did meet the committee met last on 4 June to discuss the audit results of the 23-24 financial audit. And then we followed up with a review of the audit response in this work session. The committee is meeting on this Friday, to receive a presentation on the audit that's coming up for the FY 24-25 field work, and then also to review a request for proposal criteria for upcoming RFP for the external audit contract. So that one of their roles is to look at the criteria for that contract. I'll pass it over to Deputy Financial Controller Sarah Keene for a review of the candidates.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, board and chair. My name is Sarah Keene, Deputy CFO. So John talked a lot about the audit committee, and so I just want to share the process. We went through selecting the candidates. We had 4 applicants. We sent blind copies of those applications to 3 people for review: John, the CFO, the internal auditor, and over the ACA. And based on those, I interviewed the top 2, and they seemed great. They're excited to serve, so I want to tell you a little bit more about them. First, we have Ryan Tollickson. Ryan is a principal financial analyst at the Port of Portland. He holds a master's of public administration from Penn State University, and we believe his experience working in finance for multiple public organizations provides him with that solid knowledge base that's going to be helpful to serve on the audit committee. His background, while it's not specifically in accounting, does give him a sense of the nature of the work done in the financial audit, and specifically what impacts audit findings could have. Also, before going into finance, Ryan even worked for Washington County as an HVAC technician. So that's a fun fact. Right. Next, we also have another great candidate, Megan Hall. Megan is currently the Director of Operations for a payment processing company called the Clicks Group. She is also an assistant professor at the Linfield University, focusing on the business of wine. Her experience managing operations and compliance in a very regulated environments, we feel translates well to her understanding of a financial statement audit process. We also feel that maybe having an academic on the committee could provide a nice balance. And we really appreciate her views on accountability, transparency, her passion for public service. During her interview, she did express the importance of the county's long-term financial health and the critical role that financial oversight plays in that. So we're excited about her as well. If the board does not have any questions, we plan to put the appointment of Ryan and Megan on the agenda for October 7th. Thank you.
Just
board members.
A matter of process. Will the new prospective new members be at least listening in on the meeting this Friday night?
They have been invited.
Okay. And that meeting is I still see it as a hold, but that meeting is happening for sure.
Yes, it is. We'll change that.
I don't have other questions.
Other commissioners?
I have no questions. Thank you.
I want to thank Mr. Mark Cooper for continuing his service as long as he has. It's nice to have that continuity and leadership, and I hope that our other members of the committee as listed will be able to continue their service. I always find serving on audit committees very beneficial. You get more exposure to the finances of the county and the view from the external audit, plus getting to hear your colleagues' questions too. So I'm really pleased with the process that you use to vet these applicants and look forward to the October 7th appointment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And for the record, Commissioner Fye has joined us now in the work session meeting. So we'll next move on to the library funding and governance process. I want to remind the board that this is one of perhaps multiple meetings that we'll have per our request. We received and had a work session on Tuesday, September 9th. We raised many different questions then and may have additional questions now as well. So without further ado, but the other point that I wanted to make, and I should have written this down so I was clear right away. Today's meeting is for us to have a conversation about how we would like to see things moving forward. We can certainly ask our staff questions, but if you're expressing information, please remember it is amongst the board, because the board has to provide direction and come to a level of understanding and agreement. So I'll be coming back to that later in the conversation to ensure that we're doing the job that we as the board need to do. And also I'll appreciate others' sets of eyes to ensure that I recognize Commissioner Willie, who has joined us by Zoom. So we are a full complement of 5. And Commissioner Willie, so that you know, we have 2 maps up on our wall. One is the UPAA map that was in your inbox. I sent it last week sometime. I probably wrote down that date. And the other is a larger print version of the map that we've previously only received as 8.5 by 11 in the methodology. So it's now just in a bigger form. None of us have had the opportunity, or I think none of us, I certainly haven't had the opportunity to look at it. So at some point, we may take a brief break to allow us to go look at where these lines actually are. So, okay, without further ado, I'll turn it over to our team. Marnie Kyle, Assistant County Administrator, Lisa Tattersall, and Jordan Henderson. Welcome.
Great. Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Harrington and Board. And as Chair Harrington just mentioned, my name is Marnie Kyle. I'm an Assistant County Administrator. I'm fortunate to be working with Lisa and Jordan on this important library project. I'm joined, as Chair said, by Lisa Tattersall, the WCCLS Manager, and Jordan Henderson with Marina and Company. He's been the lead on this project with us. Our intent is to walk you through the process we have undertaken over the past year to develop an approach to funding model for our WCCLS system in Washington County that we believe, we hope, has been in line with board direction. Looking at legacy funding models and making changes to support a data-driven, informed approach that addresses historical underinvestment is a challenging process, as you've all witnessed. We do appreciate, though, the library directors and the executive committee. They've been really leaning into these difficult conversations with us. And of course, we appreciate the board's support and the direction that the board has given us throughout this process. So today we will revisit with your board the process we have engaged in really since 2023. Don't worry, we're not going to take more than a few minutes. I'm going to walk you through the most recent timeline, and then Lisa will provide a reminder about the current and historic approaches to funding the system. And then Jordan is going to walk us through a step-by-step process that we've gone through with our cities and nonprofit partners to define basic services, identify service levels, and develop a funding methodology that had, during a straw poll at our last meeting on August 19th, support of most of the systems at that time. Sorry, go back. So got a little bit lost here in my, okay, I think the timeline is next. Yes, sorry. Okay, you're going to hear from Lisa in a couple of minutes that the process began with direction from the board back in 2021. Some of you were here, some of you were not, or brand new, and it was included in the IGA. This slide focuses on the current year through the end of the levy cycle. Most of the timeline should look familiar to your board, as you have seen the levy cycle alongside the funding and governance cycle many times. A couple of significant timeline milestones coming up for us include the November levy ballot measure approval. On the funding and governance side, we need to finalize the funding methodology and move into governance agreements so that we can have an agreed upon IGA by the end of June 2026. It would go into effect July 1st, 2026. A new topic that we've included in this timeline is the budget cycle. You'll see that at the bottom. As you know, we need to begin our internal budget process this fall, and we are also aware that our collaborative partners are also beginning their budget planning. Assuming approval of the levy by our voters, our goal is to communicate the initial year one funding allocation by December of 2025. I'm now going to turn it over to Lisa to walk through the journey date.
Before we turn it to Lisa, can I just underscore a couple things on this slide and maybe tie it to the chair's opening comments? So we're really at an important point in time on the funding formula so that we can start those IGA discussions. And that is where we need your board's governance and direction. These IGAs will ultimately come back to the board. So this is under board purview while we in the WCCLS collaborative model have been working at the staff level. Your board has the governance oversight. So I just want to underscore the importance of the work sessions we're having, but then also connect to this point in time and why it would be challenging to delay funding formula to a later date because that impacts partner budgets, it impacts IGA process because the current IGAs expire at the end of this fiscal year.
The last column on this slide, is it really supposed to say 2027 or 2027?
That was a typo. Thank you. Good catch.
Okay, I want to make sure I understand what's going on here fully.
So just so that it's accurate and just clear for the public, I just want to let the board know that staff will make that change in the packet and repost this. So it's the correct PowerPoint. Thanks for that.
Thanks.
Okay. But most recently, in the current IGA that we have with partners, which expires June 2026, the allocation and proportion for each partner remained the same as it was in the previous levy cycle or IGA cycle, which ran from fiscal year 16-17 through 2021. The current IGA that we're in specifies, yeah, that's the one. The current IGA specifies an annual 3% increase in allocations should the revenue be available, but due to recent resource constraints, we have not been able to maintain that. WCCLS has been able to provide a modest 1 or 2% increase to partners in recent years of general fund reductions by managing WCCLS positions and reducing our FTE by 10% over the last few years. We also had additional funds available in the fund balance that were over the target, and that we used that funding to support these modest allocation increases as well. The last time the funding model was adjusted, it was a process with the executive board and county administration taking the lead in 2015-2016. The most recent formula at that time applied a weighted distribution of checkouts, so circulation, foot traffic or walk-ins, and service population, as well as a few additional increases to specific libraries to support things like a full-time library director, minimum 45 open hours of staffing, things like that. Before that, the allocation formula was based on library checkouts. And so as staff have shared before, using checkouts to drive funding allocation can create a feedback loop where well-funded partners serving communities who use libraries in traditional ways, like book checkouts, are continually rewarded. And this is often due to these communities having higher levels of educational attainment, literacy skills, English language skills, leisure time for reading, things like that. Communities who use libraries in less traditional ways, such as accessing the computer and internet, they often that is often due to lower rates of educational attainment, language skills, etc. And so those libraries would have received less funding in that model as well, which also created a feedback loop where less funding resulted in less further investment in the future. This does create over time an unintended disparity of investment in service areas, in library service across communities, including especially the smaller cities in Western Washington County, which raised the concern back in 2021. As a result of this feedback and concern from some communities, most publicly, I think the city of Cornelius will remember at the time, and in line with the board's direction to evaluate the library funding formula using consistent data sets and community information, WCCLS included a commitment in our current IGA to conduct stakeholder engagement and analyze cooperative structures and funding to lead up to the next levy cycle, which is where we are now. And the language in the IGA was added to fulfill board goals and direction and to address the feedback from our partners. And I've just got that paragraph in italics on the slide, but I won't read, but that's what's in our IGA right now. I won't go through all of this, but I did want to include this mostly for your board's reference and for any members of our community listening today, just an overview of the board touch points on our process so far and the links to all of those work session items. And then these were the process goals that we came up with for the funding and governance evaluation work that we're doing with Marina and Company. And this was based on feedback from our partners and from your board direction. And these foundational process goals were brought back to your board for consideration. And then this is what Marina and Company has been helping us achieve. I think I'm turning it over to Jordan now.
Yeah. Good afternoon, Chair Harrington, board. Glad to be here. Appreciate the opportunity to share the work of the cooperative over the last 18 plus months. It's going to be a lot, so I'll do my best to orient you to the work. But when we look at the process goals and some of the major learnings from the current state assessment of the cooperative, one of the most prominent goals or near-term opportunities for this cooperative is to establish a more consistent base level of service across the community. And so when we think about creating base level services and then understanding the resource needs or the levy rate necessary to support those, we started by engaging partners in a series of discussions to try and define base service levels. And the work was time intensive and iterative and built upon some of the known expectations for libraries, such as the Oregon State Library minimum standards, as well as some of the expectations in the current intergovernmental agreements. But we recognized we needed to go above and beyond that to provide some more clear definition about what it looks like to provide consistent base services. So what you see in front of you is the framework that was developed by cooperative partners and brought forward as the proposal for base services, and it's characterized primarily in the subsequent tasks as sort of an expectation of a minimum of 35 open hours per week, as well as a minimum staffing expectation of 4 FTE or full-time equivalents. As you can see, there are other expectations built within here, but when we talk about trying to estimate costs of providing base services, those are some of the things that we anchor into as we move forward into the next phase of the work. Next slide. So then looking at two of the other major near-term opportunities or just goals, process goals for this work, we're looking at trying to develop or propose a methodology for allocating resources in a transparent and objective way. And because of the cooperative structure where partner libraries are independently operated, there's a need and a requirement to develop formal service boundaries and define service populations primarily for reporting purposes. And so when we ask partners what it looks like to develop service boundaries and define service populations, and then when we do research into best practices and tie into community feedback that came from our community survey, what we learned is that residents or community members using service are primarily looking at location convenience as one of the major factors for determining how or which libraries they're going to use. So you see in front of you one of the major takeaways from that community survey, which tells us, by and large, location convenience is a key factor for community members looking to choose what library to access. And so when we think about moving ahead and developing a service boundary methodology and then defining service populations, we use this as a key anchor point. Next slide. So building off of that takeaway and then conducting some research around how other systems define service population, we found that that proximity or travel time to a library is a helpful planning tool. And so given what we could find about usage data, try to validate what we were hearing in some of that research and from the community survey by understanding whether usage patterns within Washington County backed up that feedback from the community. And when you look at checkouts as a primary data point to help us understand usage patterns, the trend holds pretty consistently that the closer a community member lives to a given library, the higher percentage of their usage or checkouts occur at that library. And so in front of you is an analysis of the countywide usage trends as it relates to travel time to a given library. And so if you look at the community members that reside within a 0 to 5 minute travel time radius of a given library, 75% of their usage is happening at that library. Follow down the graph, one additional data point. If you look at a travel time radius of 5 to 7.5 minutes, 62% of usage is happening at that library. And then down further, 7.5 to 10 minutes, just around 50% of usage happens at that library. So what this tells us is that looking at travel time gives us a good indication that the community feedback about location convenience resonates in the data. And it also gives us an indication that there's an analysis around travel time that could be helpful in defining service population.
I want to make sure I understand this data. So take the extreme, the 12.5 to 15-minute distance. If what I'm tracking you said, what that would mean then is that for someone that lives 12.5 to 15 minutes from their library, that 81% of the things they check out are not from their library? Is that what this data says? Because that's what it suggests from what you said.
So if you look at it's complicated because when you look at the network of library locations in Washington County, I think what you'll find in some subsequent slides is the travel time analysis here is assuming minimal traffic. So if you imagine traveling kind of in the middle of the night, and if you get out to 12.5 to 15 minutes away, you get pretty far away from a library location. And so I think what you're saying is true, and that if your residence is greater than 12 and a half minutes away from a library, more often than not, you're not consistently using that one library. You're accessing multiple. And so it's not that they're not using
So
libraries.
that is what it means though, because it does,
I think you're getting the
I mean, it's not, this is not the percentage that someone, like the percentage of users that check something out, period.
correct.
It is percentage based on their, their distance from the location.
Yes.
That's really, thank you, G. That's really interesting because I've been involved in this and I hadn't really turned that equation around to say that the further you are from the library means the less likely you would go to the closest one. Is that
Well,
what you're saying?
part of the dynamic is if you live 12 and a half to 15 minutes away from a library, you more than likely live closer to another library. And so your usage is going to the library that's closer. And so if we took a generic geographic, a neighborhood in the county that's 5 minutes away from one library, but 12 and a half minutes away from another, I'm going to use rough math. 80% of the time I'm going to the library that's closer as opposed to the one that's farther away. And so again, this is sort of aggregated across the entire county's usage patterns. The major takeaway is that the closer you are to a library, the stronger the chance that that is the library you're using more often than not.
And are these results blind to the library itself? In other words, blind to a Brookwood versus a
Correct.
Cedar Mill.
It looks at countywide usage trends. Yeah.
Okay, so it is so.
And I would add that it's a bit more nuanced. I think if we're sometimes life activities necessitate, you could be living in one library that is within 5 minutes where you live in. It's true. I think this data resonated with me originally when presented because I do live 5 minutes within one library and also consistently utilize a different library because the what exists, what other enticing activities that working families is attractive to. For example, the Beaverton Library, there is a waterfront, there's a play area. So I think if you're raising small children, you're more likely to say, okay, I can kill two birds in one stone. Do my library needs meet that needs, and then also have a play area for the kids, and then play in the water fountain. So I feel like while this is true, because our usage to the library that is a bit further is lower than the one that is close to my house. So it is true, this data, but it's also a bit more nuanced and needs that little bit of a context too, because it's not everyone.
So,
One minute.
so time out. I think we need to let them get through their presentation today before we have board discussion on questions and comments. And
I'm
I
amenable.
think so if you have questions in terms of understanding how they're presenting this data or how to interpret this data, please raise it at that time. Otherwise, please hold your questions until you get through the whole presentation.
Yeah, appreciate that. Happy to answer more. Again, you're right. Human behavior is more complicated than this. So this is just a
General model.
Yep, a model to understand whether there's a basis we can use. If you go to the next slide, again, the purpose of doing this is to try and understand some consistent basis and methodology that can be used to assign geographic areas to partner organizations when we know that library services don't always happen that way, right? And so because of the way the model is structured, partners need to have service boundaries and we need to define some service population, which means we need to find a defensible order of operations or methodology that could be followed to assign geographic areas to partners. Thanks for battling that.
I know, there's a gremlin. My hands are.
Yeah. So, so proximity or travel time to a library is an important factor. We learned that from the community survey and some of the usage data. We also asked partners extensively what is important, what needs to happen for service boundaries to feel relevant to your operations and be supported. And what we heard from city partners is that it's extremely important for library service boundaries to line up with municipal boundaries. And so if you look at trying to communicate to a resident of a given city why they are not technically within a library service boundary, does not impact whether they can use that library, but creates interesting conversations and optics. And so one of the first rules that we learned is that we need to make sure that we assign geographic areas within a municipal boundary to those city partners. So we identified the use of voter precincts as one of, if not the only, geographic areas that's maintained within Washington County that directly lines up with municipal boundaries. And so rule number one for assigning voter precincts is if a voter precinct falls within a city's municipal boundary, we're assigning that to that city partner's service boundary.
And I think I'm just going to interrupt and come in here. One of the mistakes that I think has been made on this is you did not include the urban reserve areas from the maps that I've been able to have access to, which is something I pointed out back in August. And I think that's a change that needs to be made because that is a future municipal boundary.
Yeah, I can talk about how that was factored in and or wasn't. If you move to the second stage here of assigning voter precincts, this is where we're applying an analysis of travel time, given that we know that there is some strong correlation between travel time and usage. So we draw a relatively small radius of a 5-minute travel time around each library boundary. And for those voter precincts that haven't been assigned, if they fall within a 5-minute travel time, we assign it to that partner, given its close proximity. For a voter precinct that's within multiple partners' 5-minute travel time, we highlighted that as a conflicted or an overlapping area and had a subsequent process for resolving that.
And that only happened once.
For 5 minutes, it happened once. And I think the reason for that is primarily those 5-minute travel times are already being captured by the municipal boundaries for city partners. So then expanding the travel time radius out to 10 minutes gives us some more clarity on how to assign some of the remaining voter precincts. Again, here you notice there are multiple overlapping or conflicted areas that are crosshatched. So highlighted those and reserved a separate process for resolving those. And if you go to the next slide,
When you say overlapping, does that mean there's no library near?
It means that within that geographic area, you theoretically are within 10 minutes travel time of more than one library.
Okay.
If you go back to the slide,
Back one.
that's what it says. Time of multiple libraries. Now, if you could pause here, I'm curious as to what that separate process was. Was that a process that was done just by Washington County or with partners?
With partners, I can get to that on the next
Okay.
slide.
Thank you.
This one, I think.
Yeah, so travel time is one layer. There were multiple other layers that we knew were important from partner conversations and considering when we think about assigning these geographic areas. And so for each of these conflicted or overlapping areas, we brought information from a variety of different perspectives to the table and gave partners the opportunity to work together to identify the solution that made the most sense from a future planning standpoint, an operational standpoint, as well as a historic standpoint. And so if you look at some of the sub bullets there, what we asked partners to consider were the municipal urban planning area agreements and plan annexations. When they looked at that, we asked them to the best of their ability, understand the time scale component to that, which is difficult, knowing that we're assigning service populations for the next levy cycle through fiscal year 2031. We gave them information on historical usage checkouts to understand just what's happening with community members in that area. We overlaid current service boundaries. We, to the best of our ability, tried to visualize population distribution. So not all people within each of these areas are spread geographically evenly. And so population density in some cases helped assign a geographic area one way or the other. And then school locations, knowing that those are a big driver in services such as outreach and early literacy education, those kinds of things. So we asked partners to sit around the table, consider those areas from these different lenses, and come to solutions that that worked for both partners. And if you go to the next slide, you can see that in some cases, it was clear partners could come to some agreements about how to assign to one partner versus another. You also notice that there are some that are crosshatched. That's because those areas are fairly large and there are a lot of people in them. And the idea of assigning one way or the other didn't represent operationally what could or should be happening. And so those partners came to some agreements on shared service around those areas, as well as some agreements on how population would be divided up. You'll also see that there are some outlying areas, primarily outside of Forest Grove, Banks, and North Plains, that were without conflict. They weren't within the same travel time radius for multiple partners, but were outside that 10-minute travel time. And so for the purpose of the exercise of assigning them to a partner, we assign them to their closest library or partner location. So the results of that effort are some geographic areas assigned to partners which allowed us to go through the process of creating some estimates using the American Community Survey or census data to come to some estimates of the service population within each of those areas. And so back on that slide, you can see the leftmost column is the proposed service boundary methodologies population estimates. So what's shown on the map, both on the wall and on the last slide, compared with their current service population, and then the delta between those.
Let me ask a question, Chair.
If you're trying to understand the data,
Yes.
you bet.
So what I still don't understand and I need help with is when I look at the maps with the crosshatch and I look at the change for Aloha by 20,000, I can't figure out what the bump was. It didn't come from the crosshatch areas, right?
Nope.
Correct.
Okay.
If you go back, Marnie.
The basic methodology.
It came from that first 5-10 minute
Correct.
time. Okay, I just wanted to highlight that so that I understand that.
Good question. Okay. Oh, yeah.
If we're on that slide, then could I ask a question about the conflicted area? The slide before this,
Sure.
the one before that. So how did that factor into what happened? Where did that get assigned to? Because I'm trying to figure out the second slide where Hillsborough, it's quite large. I'm not sure how that fits. Like, I'm trying to figure out if I'm intrigued by this because I don't see the 10 minutes. I see more than 10 minutes in how the map is structured. If you go one more slide, Marnie, forward. There you go, that one.
Are you referring specifically to Hillsborough's?
Hillsborough, yes.
So I may have excluded there. If you're talking about the northern and the southernmost areas, it's likely that those areas were assigned to Hillsborough because it was with it was outside of the travel time radius for all libraries, and it was assigned to its closest.
Oh, okay.
And so when we look at assigning some of those larger, they're very large voter precincts because there are fewer people, the density is different. So the impact on service population is relatively low. Actually, I guess I'm looking at it, it's conflicted.
Mm-hmm.
And so partners viewed it from this lens and decided to fully assign it to Hillsborough. I guess that was the resolution in that case.
And it was fully vetted. Everybody agreed. Okay.
Yep,
Staff partners agreed.
correct. Through the funding and governance process. Yeah. Okay. So we've established base service level agreements or a framework for doing that. We use that to estimate the costs, providing base services for the purpose of informing a levy, have started the process of assigning geographic areas and estimating service population for the purpose of informing funding allocation, which is obviously one of the most interesting or highly anticipated parts of this conversation. So before we get there, we spent time with partners understanding what are the factors that impact the cost of providing base service levels. And there are many, but to boil them into some clear categories, there are a few for us to consider. Service population is a huge one. When you think about the general size of a population being served by a library being mostly proportionate to the size of the library and the scale of their operations to serve it. And so going back, if you look at the libraries that have larger service populations, generally speaking, they are sized and staffed and funded at a level to support the larger service population. So that's something we know. We also know some of the past practices for assigning service population were done in different ways, and so we can't take that as a one and done, one for one input or factor. The next is operational decisions regarding library size and staffing, and so. Like I mentioned, in this model, libraries are operated independently and autonomously by partners, and so operational decisions about what size of library, what configuration of library, what types of services, how many people, and at what level are necessary to provide those services have a huge role to play in informing what it costs for a partner to provide base service levels within this system. Usage is another factor that influences operating costs. But if we get back into some of the history that Lisa mentioned earlier, using usage as a primary factor for allocating funds creates a reinforcing cycle where those that have had the resources to provide the amenities and create the service outputs continue to be funded, and those that haven't don't. So that's a factor that needs to be used sparingly. And then there are some just differences in how partners exist in the system, whether they are city partners versus nonprofits that have a large role to play in what it costs and what they need to support to provide service. And so if you move past many different conversations and research and partner engagement on what it looks like to develop a transparent and an objective methodology, one thing we knew from the very beginning is that using usage as a key factor in allocating funds would not allow us to work towards the process goals of establishing funding according to a transparent and objective methodology that supports consistent base services. So we're left with factors such as service population, some operational inputs, specifically staffing levels, and then the acknowledgement that nonprofits and city partners are different. And so I'll go through on some following slides kind of how this came to be, but at its core, the proposed funding allocation formula uses service population and its relationship with staffing levels to help assign what we're calling funding units to partners of different sizes, where we can then assign $1 per unit based on cooperative averages for costs per staffing unit for providing base level services to arrive at some base allocation for providing base services. To acknowledge that nonprofits have historically relied on county investment to support their administrative costs and facilities, we added an allowance specific to nonprofits that you see at the bottom based on his average dollars per square foot for nonprofit partners, to bump allocations up to acknowledge that difference between city and nonprofit partners. Slide. So the first component of that funding allocation formula is tying service population to some unit that we can use to consistently assign dollars to per partner. And when we ask partners to help us estimate the cost for providing base services, we also ask them to help us understand staffing levels to provide base services, given that we know some partners are providing service above and beyond, some we're not quite reaching what we've defined as base services. And so each of those partner data points, their estimates for the staffing levels and full-time equivalents per their service population are plotted on this chart. What we found is there's a really strong correlation up and down the cooperative regardless of size. And so that trend line represents that relationship, which is about 4.5 FTE per 10,000 service population served. Slide. And so using that relationship, we essentially built a reference table or a reference model that allows you to understand the generic staffing profile and staffing levels necessary for partners to serve different sized service populations. One of the things that we know about allocating funds on a per capita basis is that it becomes highly sensitive to the way you estimate population and population growth. And so to provide some predictability and some stability in how this allocation methodology gets used moving forward, we tried to reduce the sensitivity by breaking service population into 2,500 service population bands. So if you see that table here, we know our base service agreements or framework require all partners, regardless of how few or how many are in your service population, to have at least 4 FTE. So we assign a 4 FTE to all partners. And then for each additional 2,500 in service population above a base population of 5,000, we add increments of funding units to build up this profile of units. So there's 2 examples here. For a partner A that serves 16,500 in service population, you can see that their staffing units are the base 4 plus an additional 4.5. For a larger partner, partner B, serving 118 in service population, it's a base 4 plus an additional 50.625. Just as some generic examples of how you build these units up.
Jordan, this is generic, but
Yeah.
when you round it up or down, wouldn't it be closest number, 16,500, closest would be 17,500 versus 1,500 you're counting in your example?
Yeah, good question. Thank you. We use those bands as sort of thresholds. So your population needs to exceed the next band before you receive those additional units. Sort of how we handled the rounding there. So if you follow that methodology of assigning funding units, this is the base funding formula results. Now, this is not what was proposed for implementation. This is modeling what funding allocation looks like according to the proposed methodology without consideration of how you implement this. So I just want to make that really clear. Go to the next slide, Marnie. So throughout this whole process, one of the things we've been interested in understanding is the equity of investment that's happened over a period of time, both historically and moving forward as we look at allocating funds in different ways. And I'm going to show on the next slide what that looks like. But before wanted to give you a little understanding of the data that's behind that viewpoint or that lens. We've used the Social Vulnerability Index, which is an index that comes from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, that takes into account 16 variables from census data or from the American Community Survey. And that those 16 data points are summarized by these 4 key areas: socioeconomic status, household characteristics, racial and ethnic minority status, and then housing type and transportation. And all of those data points are put together to create a composite score or an index score for a community that goes from low to high. So the higher your SVI score, the higher the level of overall vulnerability for a community. If you go to the next slide, we've used this index both in the current state assessment and then as a lens for understanding how funding allocation is impacting this. And so what you'll see on both of these graphs is a plot of each partner's service population's total SVI score plotted from left to right. So low SVI score on the left to the highest on the right. And on the vertical axis, the dollars per capita invested by the county in those partner organizations, again, using their service populations. So the graph on the left represents what we found in the current state assessment, taking fiscal year, I believe, 2024 allocations divided by service populations and then compared to social vulnerability. What you find is a fairly wide variation in partners, as well as a negative correlation between dollars per capita invested and SVI. And so when we look at envisioning a different way of allocating funds, we came back and said, okay, well, what does this look like if we update social vulnerability scores based on proposed service populations and proposed allocations? And so what you'll see here is that the spread between partners gets a lot tighter. So you start tightening in some of the variation. And with the exception of North Plains, which is an outlier because its service population is relatively small. So if you look at the way funding units are assigned, their service population's right around the 5,000 threshold. So their dollars per capita look higher than if they had a service population more in the middle of the range. If you take out North Plains as an outlier, you start to see that relationship flatten out fairly significantly.
I was looking for Cornelius, but it's over here on the right.
So having a tighter spread on the right-hand side then, irrespective of the outliers that you called out, is showing us that this funding formula is more accommodating to the social vulnerability index than the prior formula.
I think what it does, the social vulnerability index is not an input into it, but what it does is starts funding at a much more consistent level, regardless of things like service metrics or social vulnerability.
Yeah. Okay. Yep.
Okay. At this point, we came back to your board. You'll remember we came back to your board seeking guidance, or we called them guideposts, to help as we prepared for ongoing discussions with the Funding and Governance Executive Committee. Thank you for taking care of the gremlins.
I'm ready.
Your board asked staff to keep partners. When we came back to you, June 10th board work session, the board asked staff to keep partners whole by providing an increase in the first year of the levy allocation cycle, beginning in that July 2026 fiscal year, to maintain a 3-month fund balance throughout the 5-year levy, and to propose a methodology to scale up for libraries who are seeing significant increases in resources, and ensure that we have reasonable implementation plans for those libraries.
Just for clarity, we did not have the benefit of some of these slides with that June 10th work session.
Yes.
That's all.
Yes.
Because I'm going to be referring city councilors to today's presentation. So thank you.
So based on the board's direction, staff worked with Jordan and we proposed these changes to the funding allocation methodology. So where we ended up with increasing the average wage from 119 to $128 per unit. This was based on the city averages, removing nonprofit salaries. To ensure every partner receives at least a 5% increase in year one of the levy, and we landed on 5% as a reasonable starting place, and reduce Aloha and Forest Grove allocations to allow for a slower ramp up of services. Lisa will now provide a brief description of how historically underfunded libraries will use the increased funds to improve library services. And then Jordan will review the results of these changes to the allocation in the SBI and then come back to me.
So the proposed implementation plan really gives libraries an opportunity to thoughtfully and sustainably scale up over time. And some of the libraries that have been historically underinvested in, there are a lot of opportunities to invest in their operations to improve how they serve their community. So one of the things libraries are going to be able to do is approach market wages over time. Some of our smaller city and nonprofit libraries really struggle to keep up with market in their salaries. Providing staff training and development where none may have existed before. I know just, for example, the Banks Library has not been able to send their staff to even local training events or local conferences. Other libraries are able to send multiple staff to national conferences. So there's a big disparity there. Automated materials handling and or other workroom materials and equipment to improve safety and ergonomics. I think that some of the libraries with higher levels of historical investment have been able to invest in some of this. And it also helps with both like staff retention and safety, and it also helps with efficiency in managing staffing costs. Self-check machines, again, helping to improve service efficiency for the community and also freeing up staff resources for other higher value work. Improved in-building amenities such as furniture that is more easily cleaned, movable, and adapted for children, seniors, and people with disabilities. I think not all the libraries have had the ability to invest in that kind of commercial grade furniture that really meets the needs of communities where they're at right now. Replacement plans for staff and patron technology. So for example, just some of our smaller cities and nonprofit libraries, they will use a computer until it just literally breaks, which is not a best practice in terms of IT management and does not enhance sort of staff productivity. And so being able to sort of look at what that sustainable technology infrastructure looks like is helpful. I think this is a really important point, but hiring and retaining more bilingual staff, going back to the market wages, it's hard to, bilingual staff are very desirable in our system. And so it is hard for a library that doesn't have market wages to hire and retain staff that reflect the community that they are serving. And then just another example of something that Cornelius had shared, providing adult literacy training is a huge need in their community. They have lower literacy levels, and being able to look at providing some of those things in English and Spanish would be really meaningful for them.
Yeah, and so if you update the funding formula that was proposed or that I talked through a little bit to reflect the increased input of 128,000 per unit, what you get are those base results in the leftmost column. The additional parts of the county proposal are mentioned within the implementation plan column. So that first column is the minimum of a 5% increase over fiscal year 26 allocations that adjusts Tigard and Tualatin. The next column are those scale up adjustments specific to Aloha and Forest Grove. So reducing the base allocation to accommodate that scale up that Lisa just talked about. The rightmost column is acknowledging the additional cost for centralized collections specific to WCCLS. And then the rightmost column is what the county proposal for allocations is.
And again, I would say county staff proposal, and it would go back to the partners for a vote after we've received full direction from your board, and then ultimately come back to your board for approval before it would be implemented.
So quickly to give you sort of a snapshot of what this tells us about the allocations in that proposal. On the left are our current states. It's the same graph that was on the left on the previous slide. The right shows what happens when you increase the input, add the minimum 5% increase, and then the scaling adjustments for allow and forced growth.
This is basically saying it's becoming less. If we use SVI as a proxy for equity, it's less equitable. Is that what I?
It's moving in the wrong way.
You're saying the proposed service boundaries are moving in the wrong way.
The proposed service boundaries and the dollars per capita from the proposal that we just walked through.
Basically, once the humans started monkeying with it, we made it worse.
There's a pure like following the model and it's
compared to
pure
the
from-
earlier one.
Yes,
Oh, that's
on the just on SVI, just
Yes.
on the
from this one view.
social vulnerability index.
Just SVI, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. When we presented this and based on conversations that we had indications that there was support from most of the executive committee, we proposed the following for their support and recommendation to come back to the board at some point. So we propose that indirect costs, also called overhead or administrative charges, would be considered allowable costs for city partners, assuming that base service levels had been met. The proposed service boundaries, if recommended by partners and approved by the board, would remain set through June 2031. That there would be no increase in county provided funds for any new full service libraries if they were added through June of 2031. Partners that operate more than one library building that closed a library. So if they had to close a library during that time frame, they would also not lose funding. So we would not reduce funding. And that starting in July of 2027, WCCLS would begin providing centralized physical collections, which reduce the cost to provide services for partners, thereby freeing up resources, local resources that they could use for other service priorities. We did talk about that before we begin, but before we get to the end of the levy cycle, that we would begin to have discussions about any changes. So by year 2 or 3, we begin to have discussions about any changes to the next levy cycle, so that by the end of year 4 at the latest, we would know what the new methodology would be. So getting ahead about a year. So we also
Just to add to that, Marnie, recognizing that 2015, 2016 was the last time that the funding model was updated. So not wanting to repeat that past practice and to continue to ensure that this is iterative as we move forward.
So we also had discussions and generalized agreement. Again, this would all be coming back to your board for final approval, but the agreements that we came to is the annual escalation or reduction process for allocations. And this is clearly dependent on the board's decision around general fund allocations. But basically, if there was a net increase, so in other words, the levy and the general fund, if there was a net increase of more than 4.25%, there would be an increase in the allocation. If there was a net decrease, that there would be an equal decrease in the allocation. So those were general agreements. Again, we haven't voted. We haven't brought this back to the board, but that was the general direction that we were heading in.
Point of clarification, because I haven't heard it said, nor do I see it on this slide. This is all reliant upon property tax revenue collections.
Yes. Yes.
'Cause I think that's part of, I watched the whole Beaverton City Council meeting, and that was never said in that meeting either.
yes,
So,
it's
and I think it's an addition that needs to be made.
we can add that. So I think it's property tax and what we received and the decisions that the board makes and how they want to allocate.
That's already covered.
Yep, we can add that. Okay, and then as you can see now, again, this is based on best case scenario, the 4.25% annual increase. So based on if all of our funding came in and we distributed the funding as these models would demonstrate, then we would project that we have enough resources over the levy cycle. Then the next slide shows that we would be staying within the 3-month fund balance as directed by the board.
Point of clarification on that, because it's come up. Could you speak to, you don't need to change the slide, whoever's changing slides. This point around fund balance recommendation, 3 months operating expense. So the money that gets directed towards this effort is both that county general fund as well as the library levy. So the library levy, they're both dependent upon property tax, but the library levy funding goes to the WCCLS group and to all of the partners. So when I hear city councilors wanting a guaranteed level, which we know we can't do because of the property tax reliance and the growth in assessed value more than 3% minimum, that's where, when you came to the board previously about that operating minimum, I felt that was very much a give on our part to not stick to the 4 months and try out the 3 months. But I don't think that city partners understand the reliance upon the general fund, and that for that portion, we have to apply our 4-month rule. And just the collection time frame, because at least one presentation of it is presenting that, well, you just distribute it out anyway, so you're not taking any county risk. But it's not so much about change of risk. I'm actually trying to get to a point of a question for you to verify or to articulate much more clearly than I am right now, that this is all based upon future forecasts, and our financial stewardship for the cooperative necessitates that we have this appropriate buffer. Otherwise, they might be laying staff off without the required minimum notice per labor agreements, for example.
Yeah, so Chair, if you don't mind, if we can just take note of that question and come
Okay.
back with, because I think we also need to remember, we are not, WCCLS is not just general Washington County property tax supported.
Right.
We would not have the robust library services here in the county without, and I'm only speaking from the county perspective, the levy in
Mhm.
place too.
Mhm.
And so levy's going to pass. And if a levy does not pass, there's also that risk of the ramp down or slow down of services. So staff will provide a more robust answer because it's a combination of both what our reserve is and the reality that we rely on the levy for operating the library system.
Thank you for reminding me of that, particularly. Okay.
Okay.
Sorry to take so long.
Okay, so we're just ending really with this slide and then the policy questions that we started with, but I wanted to have this slide sort of near the end for you. So as of July 31st and the partner conversations in August, this is the proposal that we've been moving forward, pending more discussion and direction from your board. And so would love to hear from you now. Does your board have questions about the current methodology? And then do you have additional needs that you want us to be sure and bring back for the October 14th work session?
Before we open it up, I know I need at least a few minutes before this map that's on the wall. And Commissioner Willie, you've raised your hand.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I had budgeted 60 minutes for this. We are changing venues this morning, and so they're going to boot me out of this room here. I'm already an hour past checkout.
Okay.
So I'd just like to make a few comments, and then I am going to have to drop off. And I apologize because there's a ton of information in this presentation, and that's before you even get to all the attachments that are there. So I appreciate the work that went into this. It was very good. And this has been a very good conversation as well. I've learned a few more things as we've gone through this, so that's been a good thing. The issue to me is, the biggest issue to me is the redistricting, as I call it. I don't know if that's the right term, but drawing the lines differently. If you look at what is it, slide 10, and it's talking about all of the allocations, the reallocations of population going to primarily to Aloha. And I'm looking at the map that showed that the part there. As a matter of fact, if you could go ahead and go to 10. Is that 10?
No,
Did I
10
write-
was 10,
10 is the service boundary
Service boundary.
methodology. Why
Right.
use
one thing that's
time?
one of these maps.
Or the
Okay.
chart was just the numbers.
One more. There we go. So what was included in the conversation was that the overlapping to the north of Hillsborough was included in Hillsborough, but by the statistics, 40,000 population left Hillsborough and went to Aloha. So where's that in there? If there was 40,000 that came out of Hillsborough and went to Aloha, first of all, my comment has consistently been 40,000 people aren't going to, on July 1st, immediately begin to go to the Aloha Library. One is they don't have the service level to handle it. But again, we're talking about changing people's habits. And as much as you focus on the difference between a 5-minute drive to a 12.5-minute drive, 7 minutes is almost like nothing. if you get caught up on TV highway, it's about 2 miles. But the point being that people who attend the library on a regular basis, that's the people that we're talking about here, they go there by location, as you've indicated, but they also go there because the library has the material and the services that they want and need. And if the closest library doesn't have that, they're not going to go there, and 7 minutes is not going to make the difference. So where I'm going with all of this is I like the allocation for the most part in the first year. I think Aloha getting $1 million is something that they need. The other libraries, the smaller libraries, getting the bump that they are projected to get, those are all good things. I don't have a problem with any of that. What I have a problem with it is, like I've said, I want to know where the 40,000 people that are going to leave Hillsborough and go to Aloha, where the heck are they coming from? And quite frankly, that's probably a 5-year project to bring Aloha up to speed enough to even facilitate that. So when we talk about the IGAs, I'm going to want to see some sort of plan of action from Aloha on that. But I think once we get past year one, I think, and with the uncertainty of the 4.25% and the uncertainty of the county general fund, I think all libraries should be projected at 4.25%. I don't think there should be any 10% allocation for Aloha or Forest Grove in there. All the libraries are going to need it. And we're talking about, if I do the math right, that's about a reallocation of about $160,000 going to all the libraries at that point in time. And everybody goes, all boats, all rise, 4.25% annually. And that's what I think should happen. So I guess that's generally my thoughts. The SBI thing is, as Jason, as you pointed out, we start mucking with that and all of a sudden it doesn't make sense anymore. And I think, to me, it didn't make sense to me. But I do recognize that some of our libraries, like Cornelius, like North Plains, like Banks, all have their own individual service needs. And we've got to recognize that. The current formula based on circulation, again, I was around when that was created, doesn't meet that anymore. And I don't think it's relevant anymore. So I'm glad to see we're going to a different methodology. I just don't think we're there yet. So I will maybe write up more of my comments about thoughts about all of this. And I apologize that I do have to drop off, but
So Commissioner Willie, if I can interrupt.
sure.
So our next opportunity for the board to come to this topic will be October 2nd. We will not be having our board retreat that day. So I suggest, yes, write down your thoughts. You won't be able to share those with the full board in advance, but you can certainly review them with staff and see what their thoughts are. We, all board members, have been sitting here very patiently, so we're going to have to bump the agenda further, and I don't know what that's going to mean, so that we at least, all 5 of us, have the opportunity to share our comments on the current methodology. And then we're going to have to come back to this topic on October 2nd.
I completely agree. And thank you, Chair. I'll look forward to that conversation, and I will be communicating more of my information to Lisa and Tanya. And I thank you very much for letting me jump off early, and thanks everybody for this information. It was really good.
Thank you for accommodating joining us while you're on vacation. Really appreciate it.
Okay. All right. Bye.
Okay, who would like to go first? Today's the day to get your comments and questions out.
I guess I will ask too, just because I think I want to maybe tag on to what Commissioner Willie's talking about a little bit, or at least critique it to some extent. I listened to the discussion about Aloha and his description that people aren't going to use, they're not going to go where the services that they need and want are not, even though they may be closer. And that's true. And also to me, speaks pretty loudly to why we need to, from an equitable standpoint, build those out over time in a way that, I mean, this seems like a classic chicken egg problem from my perspective, like to conclude that they're not going to go there because it's not built out and say that's also why you shouldn't fund it more. I in the long run, I don't buy that. I certainly in the short run, I think the increases in year one, that's already been corrected though, or adjusted, I should say. Corrected's the wrong word. That's been adjusted. I would like to see the system built out so in 2031 it looks like what we want it to look like. And I'm a little less tied up in the, the sort of can they do it in year one or can they reasonably spend this? So that's, I guess, what I would share so far.
Okay, who's next?
I can go next, Chair. Before I get into my comments, I know we've been responding to the Beaverton letter, but there was an email that came in from Frank Bubenik, the mayor of Tualatin. Has the staff had a chance to see that question? And what's your response to some of the question that's raised in there?
I have seen it, but have it in front of me, so I don't want to say what my response is. I think that I don't want to respond right now without looking at it again.
I guess.
I mean, I remember in general that it was concerns about
Yeah, I think it says
taxes versus the allocation formula. So
I can read it to you, and I think we can respond to him afterwards, and hopefully he'll watch this. But he was referring to a slide,
and I
yeah,
think that's
but
also why we provided a spreadsheet that shows current. So in the current methodology and allocation, there are cities that were within the unincorporated area that contribute more county property tax than they're getting back. If my memory serves me right, Tualatin actually flips. So they currently are receiving more than they contribute in property tax. And in the new methodology, it is very close, but it's opposite. And so we have not responded until we had this meeting.
discussion.
And just a point of clarification, that letter was to the board, so that would be a board response back to the mayor. And we can make sure that you see where it is today and that the per capita tax collected to what is in the proposed allocation. And there are some changes. So this is where for your board, as you discuss the funding formula, what is your policy position on this? Do you want a funding formula that is based on taxes collected in an area get redistributed back to the area? So I think that gets into the overall framework of the funding formula, but we can make sure that we follow up in your next work session with that.
Right. Because I feel like the conversation, especially Jordan, when you were presenting, you don't need to go back to the slide number over here, but the slide around the voter precinct, I feel like the message was clear about Tualatin, but not so much about Hillsborough. In Hillsborough, what they put into the system, getting back their portions of it. But so we can, I think there was a lot of good feedback here today that we can pull it out. And I think I think we're responding to another letter, so it's worth the board to also respond to Mayor Bubenek's email to us as well. So if the staff could draft something and I think to bring it forward to the board, just facilitates that.
Can't do
further.
that until we have direction on the methodology. So, but I'll work with them on something, so at least we have a starting point.
Thank you, Chair. So my comment is, I feel like you all staff have been very resilient and really empathetic to, shown a lot of empathy to city concerns. You know, as a commissioner that represents both Aloha and Beaverton, especially the two libraries in Beaverton that could potentially would have been impacted if the original funding was to go through. I sympathize with that. And as someone who also uses both the Aloha Library and the Beaverton Library, due to my own, you know, juggling with the kids and trying to figure out how do I make the best of the time usage there, I get it, and I appreciate you all trying to meet, figuring out a not necessarily a compromise, but a middle ground for what Beaverton has been expressing. In terms of what you have, I really I appreciate the amount of work that goes into it. But I also heard that when we were talking about the social vulnerability index, I did, even though it wasn't said in these terminology, I did hear that, you know, sometimes equal resources doesn't mean equitable. And however we can address that, I heard messed it up with the formula and now it's not meeting the index. And I heard that and I don't know where to go from there. How do we facilitate equal resources while also being equitable? But I'm comfortable where we're heading in the direction we are in. And I really appreciate what how our board is facilitating these conversations to meet the needs of electeds who are expressing concerns, because we're all elected by residents, citizens, and we have to represent them. So when city mayors and city councilors speak up, they are they are speaking up for their bosses, right? So whatever we can do to meet their needs, and also figured out that as a Washington County, that within that, while we're trying to meet everyone's needs, we don't facilitate an equitable outcome as well. And I say that because I want to make sure that we don't have a favorite, and that we're really being pragmatic, and we're being transparent, and we're having as many conversations as we need to make the final decision. So all that in a nutshell to say thank you.
We're not going to be able to have as many conversations as we need, because in order for the transition to happen by the end of June, we need to make decisions. We can't just be representing what other people say.
Yeah, I
So I
hear
just
you.
want to make sure you understand that.
No, I hear you. I feel like I've heard that statement here, and yet we're having more conversations. So I think I think there's, I don't know. Maybe there will be, maybe there won't be. But we're in a right direction right now, where maybe we'll have more discussions. Maybe we won't, but I think if there's more concerns, I think we have to have the conversation we need. We can't just say we've talked enough about this and we got to move forward. We got to make sure we turn every rock in this conversation. We're hearing everyone, because sometimes we could disagree, but it's important we hear from cities and we hear from partners that are nonprofits as well.
Thank you. I've been noting who is articulating information needs or a different perspective, and Commissioner Fly, I've not heard you add any.
Yeah, I don't need any information needs. I don't have.
Okay. Commissioner Treese.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I appreciate you being here today. It's great. And I appreciate the people that are here in the room listening as well. this is not easy and it is so complex. I recognize that. And I take a lot of responsibility here because I've been in these rooms as we've discussed this, and I'm sure that, you know, I was there when we talked about the importance of distance around libraries. If I had then the benefit of hindsight that I have today, I might have considered weighting somehow the distance to the services available. I think we may have missed that a bit in the identification of what libraries. That doesn't mean that we don't work to enhance libraries, but it means that we have a clear representation of what happens. What I'm in terms of who goes to what library. I agree with Commissioner Willie that I don't think we're going to see a 40,000 person switch. That's not going to
I'm
happen.
just gonna tell them July 1.
Yeah, you
I'm-
can't go. You got to go over here. And that we know that that's not going to happen, but we know at the same time that we want to increase the services available at other libraries. So what is that? What is that ramp to get there? So what I fall into the hole of right now, and to your point about methodology, Chair, is is there a way to look back? And I'm not asking you to do all this work, please, but is there a way that we can say what would it look like if those services were part of the weighting process? Is that
Like
clear
the
to you?
robustness of the services offered.
Yeah,
But it's been this hard just to have a base level. of
I know,
service.
and I will tell you right now, I feel very responsible because I've been in this process with everyone along the way. So is Commissioner Willie, and that's the one piece. All roads on our methodology lead back to that decision. For me, that's where I look and say, okay, that was the biggest decision we made. If you look at your first table with the graph, it's that location piece, and I'm not sure we got it right on target for that piece. But that's under the bridge, and we have to move forward. But I do think we need to look at what our future is going to be like 1, 2, 3 years, 4 years down the road. The other thing that I'm going to say here is that I really want to make sure as we move forward that we have a review process. And Marnie, you did mention this in over the next 5 years. I'm not sure I want to wait as long as you may have indicated. So I think that we need to be monitoring this as we go along. So those are my comments.
Okay, thank you. So I have a lot to say. I want to start by thanking all of the Washington County staff and partners who've been working to improve our system and modify our system, modernize our system, moving it forward from where we've been. It's been a lot of work. Boy, I realize now how ambitious we were in setting up this goal. And to the point you were just making, Commissioner Treese, as Marnie was mentioning, taking stock in year 2 and 3 in terms of how is it working, and getting started then is a year earlier than the way we were able to in 2021. Yep, we heard you. It took us a while to figure out how to go about a process for a new methodology. But the cooperative developed the RFP, and the cooperative has been doing the bulk of all this work with expertise. Don't get me wrong, but wow, that's been a lot. To one of your earlier comments, Marnie, I say yes. You and Washington County staff have definitely been following board direction. Absolutely. And I want you to internalize that. I've also heard that there was a step-by-step process with partner staff, including city staff. Before this work session, I watched the most recent Beaverton City Council meeting on libraries, on Tuesday, August 26th, and I didn't get the impression that their city council had, the same level of information we did. I got no indication that they had the benefit of the document that was put together, for example. And that is, to me, sort of a little mind-boggling given my extent of having the library project, governance and funding project, come into the monthly chair mayor's meeting and my pushing out materials to the mayors and encouraging their question. I have a few bottom lines here. It's a cooperative. I want us to succeed, to continue to succeed as a cooperative. And things have devolved where that is at risk. And so I want all parties to take a deep breath and say, do we really want this whole thing to fall apart? Or do we want to continue to move forward? I think folks want to see continue to move forward, but they need some clarity of information. I also heard from that Beaverton City Council an expression that the urban unincorporated areas are subsidized by the cities. And I don't know that to be true. And that's something that I want further information back at our October 2nd. At our prior work session on this September 9th, the materials included this chart, but we didn't spend time really going over this chart. It's labeled FY 26-27 projected county property tax generated versus proposed allocation from the county. And I have assumed that this is just our overall property tax and illustrating for the geographic areas of each of these cities what they generate versus what the current proposed allocation provides. And that is what Mayor Bubenek is responding to, because for him, for his jurisdiction, there's a difference of about $220,000. But what this chart tells me is that the urban unincorporated areas are subsidizing everybody else. So we're going to need to spend some time on this in October.
So Chair, on that note, I know you had to step out just for a brief moment. We did briefly talk about that, and we'll bring a chart that shows the allocation today to that chart you have in front of you of the proposed allocation, so you can see that change as well.
Yeah, we need to make sure we spend time on it. So there were other things expressed, but fundamentally for me, I don't yet have confidence in this map. And I want to have confidence in this map. From what I've been able to tell, and there isn't time for me to spend any more time on this map today. Sorry, I don't mean to keep putting my hand in front of your face. There are things called urban reserves, and those areas need to go to the cities, period. It's also backed up by this board adopted county strategic plan. There is no question that cities have programs to support community building and that we have adopted policy where we support our cities. So any area within a city needs to stay with that city library. We have to honor the county strategic plan. And I also want to see that in the IGA that it explicitly states that any areas that annex into a city, there is a transfer of that area to the city, irrespective of any other area libraries. it needs to be on a time frame, like a path that's implemented over 2 years. But we're not waiting till the next levy cycle, unless it's within that 2-year cycle. The question that has been posed to me is, why do you want to keep promoting the nonprofit libraries? And it's not that I'm trying to promote the nonprofit libraries. Rather, I'm trying to be equitable I'm trying to recognize the role of equity in our community, and no system is perfect. I think the methodology that you've used is a good general methodology, but there are some nuances, right? That I think need to be looked at. And so I've really tried. I've taken snippets of maps, right, and blown them up. So I'm happy to go over these with you. I'm happy to have a meeting, to go over that map and see how I've been looking at it versus what it may or may not be representing. And come prepared October 2nd for that. But time is of the essence. We really do need to come to closure on this either October 2nd, which is a Thursday, or that following Tuesday, in order to hit this timeline. I think that's the absolute latest we can do.
So, Chair, because you brought up the timeline, I just want to reiterate the importance of the timeline and connect a few dots. As your board knows, guess what? We are starting budget discussions and preparing for next year. Our partners are doing the same. So that is where December 2025, you see on the last row, proposed allocation amounts for cities for fiscal year 26-27 budget is extremely important. That they have the final at that point. And that the formula, the allocation is used to build the IGA process, which is the negotiation process between each jurisdiction. And we have many partners. So that is time intensive to have that completed by June of next year.
Before, yeah.
Chair, I have a couple more thoughts.
Sorry, you should have interrupted me earlier. Okay, go ahead.
The just you brought up the topic of some cities' perspectives that the cities are, in their belief, sort of contributing more to unincorporated areas, or that there's not equitable financial contribution there. I've heard that a number of times. I've also heard the question at multiple city council meetings in the last 2 weeks about what the county's doing to contribute to the unincorporated areas, libraries, like we're the city, essentially, in that example. And I want to walk through this a little bit for a moment, because what I said to them, my response to them was, on some level, that is like, we're doing that through the mechanism we have, which is an eroding general fund total support and levy support. In this example, and this is where I think this is important for us all to recognize, is that in the example of the funding formulas that have been described and the facility square foot stuff for the nonprofits that are basically serving the unincorporated areas. I mean, that is there's not perfect overlap, but that's kind of what's happening. That's the critique, or where the critique, I believe, is coming from, is that is being funded with money that is coming from all over the county, that is being focused, so from within cities, that is being spent not on city facilities, but on operating the nonprofit facilities. I think we should just acknowledge that. And I do believe that we have there is a different financial need there, because there is not a municipality that is supporting part of these services. But I do want to point out where I think that's coming from. I think that's a big part of it. And unless I'm misunderstanding the formulas, we
Here's
are
where I-
allocating.
Here's where I think there's a limitation. Cities have bonding capacity. It's just their library facilities are a sunk cost. The best the partners have been able to come up with are the different accommodations that have been made for funding units and dollars per square foot. I'm looking at slide 19. What slide you're looking at? I was looking at Commissioner Snyder's screen.
26. 26.
Yep. And we also, I have to go back here, we made an accommodation about how cities could use funds to cover for,
Indirect.
yes.
Yep.
So that's why going back to slide 19 is important. Because there wasn't work that could be done to get them all on equal footing in a model, in a general model.
Mhm.
We had to come up with this model. So if any of the cities had a better recommendation, that's been done. And we can't go back. So I've only heard criticism. I haven't heard different options.
Alternative suggestions.
Yeah,
I think
because
they-
I'm not going back to the
Yeah,
old allocation
I think
either.
I think they like once I explained that okay, the county is contributing, but we're using the resources we have, which is going to be increasingly reliant on levies and other things. It sort of I think it kind of clicked for some of them. I think they were.
I
kind
don't
of, "Oh,
agree
that-
with the statement that the county is contributing towards the nonprofit specifically. We're contributing to the full cooperative system. Okay. And we don't have a city tax like they do that goes to the UUAs for supporting the UUAs. So that's why I'm challenging how this has been put. This slide 19, which is also reflected on the 26 you were looking at, but it doesn't have all the accommodations on it,
Mhm.
was the best base funding formula that the cooperative with a consultant expert was able to come up with. And they've had this for months. And as stated earlier, the cooperative staff agreed to this. So I am really questioning what level of communication and agreement was there going on between city staff and their elected officials.
That's definitely.
Because
a
we're
point that's-
getting fire now because they're saying, well, we didn't know.
Yeah, that's definitely a critique that we and an issue we've kind of identified and that we need to learn from for the future. I do think
I don't know that's ours to fix.
not entirely.
Well, it's
Partly.
part of the governance model suggestion, right?
I took stuff to the chair mayor's meeting so much. They knew what was going on, Commissioner Treese.
Thank you. I understand that. I'm just saying that that's been the suggestion we've heard.
Yeah, it's easier to keep your head in the sand for as long as you want and pipe up later. So the point is, it's a cooperative. It's a cooperative. Okay. And I've heard all kinds of statements being said in public meetings about how multiple city councilors are saying, well, we're questioning if we want to support your sponsorship of a property tax levy on the ballot. Okay, well, you better think about the alternative.
That's another thing that I think is
Yep.
being lost until we point out or until when we're having those elected official conversations.
So the best we can do right now, because we still have a full agenda, is we've stated things here publicly. I hear an information need from Commissioner Willie, an information need from Commissioner Snyder. I've expressed my information needs. Commissioner Treese and Commissioner Fye have no further information needs, but we'll go over the latest information on October 2nd, and we're going to have to come to a decision. And any formal action we would take will be October 9th.
We will stick to that timeline.
So Chair, based on this discussion, staff will send the board a follow-up email, just what we heard and what we'll be prepared to follow up with and information at your next work session. And for public transparency, I will present that next week during my leadership update as well.
Thank you very much. And once again, thank you to all the staff who've been on this very ambitious journey with us. And we're still trying, and know you're still trying. And onward, ho we go. Thank you too, Mr. Henderson. Appreciate it.
Chair, attached to this agenda item is a letter response to Mayor Beatty. That was a follow-up from last week. Would your board like to consider it this week, or would you like to postpone that to next week?
I would like
Next
to
conversation.
postpone that as well, because we're going to have to be able to articulate what the funding proposal is and make note of that, because all we're doing at this juncture is chasing statements. And I think we've got to, we as a board have to come to a point of saying, this is the direction that we've agreed to and move from there.
Okay, so then in support of your board, staff will continue to collect any and distribute per our communications channels to your board any letters from elected officials. I will just take that to the next step of direction because we have a letter from Mayor Bubenek. The same process would go in place, that we would then respond to all electeds at that point.
Yep.
Based on your board direction.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you. And I made sure to take Mayor Bubenek's email to us and forwarded that through the appropriate channel. So, yeah. Okay. So we have an executive session that needs to start at 3:10 because we have a subsequent one after that, and we have a board meeting that starts at 6:30. So first, let's start with tonight's meeting agenda. Okay. It was updated. The 6-month closure action item F2 was revised, and item D4 on the consent agenda was added. I do anticipate that we'll have a variety of public comment tonight, and if the lunchtime demonstration was any indication, we may have a repeat of public comment that you had on August 26th while I was out on my medical leave. So you had on August 26th, you had a dedicated public comment period on that date for the River Road item, which is item F2. An applicant, the developer, held a community meeting on September 16th, but I wanted to ask the board, at this juncture, I'm thinking that if people want public comment, they should just do it at the beginning or the end of the meeting. We do have an updated staff presentation for F2, which may cause people to decide, okay, they understand things better. But I don't think further public comment's going to change the proposal from staff at this point, but I wanted to bring it to you all.
I think that's true, though. I also think that aren't all the spots already signed up for both amounts of public testimony?
So, Madam Chair and Board, you now have 5 people coming at the beginning for your 10 minutes total, and you have 9 people currently signed up for the end of the meeting at the 5 minutes. So it is in your discretion what to do.
Are any of the topics for the second public comment period on items on the agenda?
No.
Okay. We have just a maximum of 30 minutes at the end of the meeting. So would you all like me to reduce the time frame or just tell people we're only going to do the 30 minutes and everybody else who doesn't get to speak can submit their written testimony?
I think
The latter is my preference.
yeah, I can see that, Chair. But I'm wondering if the residents are coming in line with the same format that we facilitated at the last meeting for that agenda item.
No, we noticed it the last time and we didn't notice it this time.
Okay.
Yeah, last time
Okay,
it was
then-
noticed as a public hearing.
Yes.
And now it's not.
You'll state that in the action part of it.
No, I'll state it at the beginning of the meeting.
I would prefer to give people like 90 seconds or let me rephrase that, just less time. So maybe 3 minutes instead of 5 minutes and let the 9 people speak. But that's my personal preference. Just that people take the time
I
to
hear it. What?
I think I would prefer the 3 minutes per person, but clearly stated at the front.
Okay. The other thing that I'm going to state up front is if people have comments on the Cornell Road Transitional Housing Program, that there is a virtual information meeting on Tuesday, October 14th on Zoom. And if people want to provide their written comments, feel free to do so. But, I think they need to stay tuned till that meeting as well. So, are there any other questions or comments on today's agenda?
No.
Okay, so why don't we go to board communication? Welcome back, Mr. Shanley.
Good to be back.
Yes, please.
I wanted to mention I was gone, but last week it was the Pacific Northwest Clean Water Association. Their annual conference was held in Portland. In addition to staff attending, and we had a lot of staff actually presenting some great sessions there. We participated in the Operations Challenge, often described as the Wastewater Olympics, during the conference. Teams from across the Northwest competed in a series of timed events, and I'm happy to share that our team, the Clean Water Services River Rangers, swept all 4 categories, which is a major achievement, especially because all but one member is brand new to the team. So they've been working and training, and they got the gold. Bit brief. The other thing of note was with respect to Clean Water Services Essentials. The last 2 weeks we've had Essentials training. The first was geared towards staff from our city and special district partners, and that was held at the Durham facility. Last week we welcomed elected officials to Hillsborough, Tualatin, and North Plains. So I was able to get back in time for that session. We had a lot of dialogue, a lot of questions. It was a very interactive evening, and I want to thank Director Snyder for kicking off the session. He had some great remarks and gave them a preview of all the things that they were going to learn, and he did a good job of setting us up. So it was great.
How many attendees did you end up having?
I would say
8-ish, 11
Yeah,
officials
about-
and 2 staff.
yeah,
Like Elizabeth saying 5.
Okay. Thank you. We can't, if you're going to talk, you have to come to a mic. Ms. Angie.
Good afternoon, Chair and Board. So a reminder of Law Library Services. Law Library Services are is a state-funded service. Due to inadequate state funding, the Law Library will need to close in-person services during certain times over the current biennium. The first closure of the fiscal year will happen from October 6th through the 10th. During this time, the Law Library will offer remote services during regular business hours. Attorneys with key access will be able to access the library. The Law Library's website was updated earlier this month to reflect the change in service, and signs will be posted at the door. Unfortunately, my updates seem to be reflecting more loss of funding than new revenue coming in. And so I do want to just inform your board, we will be taking an additional step during your supplemental budget of coming to your board during work session and talking more about what is the revenue loss and also service impacts in each supplemental budget process. Typically, a supplemental budget reflects revenue in or new grants, unanticipated grants or revenue. So we're just in a very different point in time and don't want to lose that understanding of what's actually being reduced at that county and where is that funding loss coming from, and that really being clear on what the service impact to our community is. I would also like to invite our LUT partners. Okay, there's Lauren. Lauren and Aaron Wardell, if you could come up to the table. So it's great. I like when we gain employees from our partner jurisdictions. So Lauren Scott is joining us. I have other words, but I'll use them in other contexts than public meetings. Lauren Scott is LUT's new public affairs and communication manager. So thank Melissa DeLizer. When you get those emails, it will be Lauren Scott in the future. She started last week, September 15th, and was selected after a robust recruitment process. Lauren has prior experience with the cities of Hillsborough and Tigard and extensive background in communications and community engagement. As I said, she is replacing Melissa Lizer, who is retiring on January 2nd, and just want to appreciate, and I know we'll have time later on to appreciate Melissa, but this is a great example of employees, sharing what their plans are so that we can do great succession and planning. And so Melissa is focused on getting Lauren up to speed and working part-time at wrapping up some special projects. So welcome, Lauren. And did you want to say anything, Erin?
That was a really great introduction.
Well, now we have a face to the name. And this is your board minus or short of Jerry Willie. But you're going to get intimately familiar with all of our districts. They're all my districts. And the various issues that come up. And so welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome. Yes, and to Melissa, well-deserved retirement. Thank you for all your years of service. And thank you for giving the county agency the opportunity to ensure a smooth transition. There is no filling anyone else's shoes. You fill your own shoes, but we do know that communications is a big job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lauren, congratulations. Good to see you again.
Yes.
I knew our paths would cross eventually.
Is that the jurisdiction?
Most recently Hillsborough.
Hillsborough.
But also
But
He was at Tigard for many years.
Great.
thank you.
Welcome.
Now you're with the best county in the state.
now you're with
Amen.
everybody.
Right.
Very true.
So I'm biased, I'd extend past state borders, but that concludes my update.
Welcome.
Chair, Commissioners, respecting the time, one quick admin note for you. On Thursday, this Thursday, the 25th, our office will be conducting its first retreat in about a year on Thursday morning. If you're wondering what exotic locale we're headed to for this, will be the Washington Street Conference Center, 2 blocks away. So between 9 and 12, there won't be anybody in our office.
Yeah.
But Courtney and I will have our phones in the event of a emergency, and then we'll be back in the building in the afternoon. That's all I have for you today.
Great, great. Do you think we'll still need the full 45 minutes for the executive session?
Molly?
I'm hoping we can get it done in less than 45 minutes.
So let's say a half an hour, okay? And so that, let's give ourselves, there's four of us. Oof, uh, okay, 1, 2, 3, make good use of 5 minutes or less to each of us. Okay. Great. Role model that.
Are we leaving now? Because I'm going to run.
Oh,
No, we're doing.
no, we're
recording.
doing. Oh, you're talking about.
Oh,
for a
I
break.
thought we were taking a break.
Oh.
I'm with you.
Hands out the door.
Actually, you're right. Let's take a 5-minute break. Let's do a break. Vaccination.
Alrighty, commissioners, welcome back.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. We're getting rocking and rolling. We're on board communications now. Who wants to go first?
I can go rapidly. I'll be more abbreviated than normal. Multiple city council levy presentations last week, Sherwood, King City. I wanted to just recognize Chair Harrington was recognized at the Explore Tualatin Valley board meeting and given an award last week, and recognition, and I thought that that was worthy of mentioning, and I think everybody really appreciated her leadership of the county and on the board for a number of years. So wanted to mention that. On Friday at the Public Safety Coordinating Council, there were a couple different topics that were covered in a variety of ways, but just very briefly, we did end up approving the community corrections allotment plan, which we are required to have an approved plan, I believe, every 2 years. And so that was just approved. A lot of work on the staff's part. Yesterday, Walton City Council meeting that was not about the levy, or not supposed to be about the library levy. It was just my regular sort of check-in with them, and they mostly made it about the library levy. So just, you heard some of that feedback already. Tomorrow evening, I am going to be a guest at the CPO4M meeting, and then just a reminder, I'll be at WEFTech leaving this weekend and coming back on Wednesday afternoon or evening.
I'm still trying to figure out what materials I'm going to land for the roundtable because I have to get you and Commissioner Willie a hard copy by the end of the day, Friday. So anyway, there you go. Thank you. Okay, who's next?
I can go. Um, I finally have the schedule for the levy. So Commissioner Snyder, I'll be joining you some of these levy presentations. And I did go to the Tiger Brewery for the public safety presentation today. I've never been there. I didn't even know there was a Tiger Brewery. I'm aware of the Hillsborough Brewery.
Tiger's got
I
two.
think I messed it road. Yeah, I actually learned that a lot of cities do. But it was the sheriff's staff did a great job. And I actually had to leave to come to this meeting. So I'm sure they finished it off and did a wonderful job after that. But you'll be seeing me and I has the schedule. So you'll know which ones I'm attending, co-attending with you in the future. And then last week I attended JPAC meeting, and one thing I want to highlight JPAC, there was no action taken, so there's no anything that is sort of burning for this board. But one of the things I really wanted to highlight for you all is, and that I will share with you, I'll try to get Bryn to share this. JPAC does a fatal crash report every beginning of the meeting. They've been doing that since the beginning of, I guess, since I joined. Before I joined, they've done that. But one of the cool things that they're doing this year is that they're tracking where these crashes are happening, eliminating the names of the people who got fatally injured and ended up dying. And then, so they're removing the name of the person. But what they also are doing is this other thing that I think many of us at that space has been asking, is to show a map of where these fatalities are occurring. So they implemented this this month for the first time to show the map of all the fatalities. And I think it will really elevate the conversation to sort of talk about the system level rather than the individual responsibilities. So that's a really cool thing that I thought was really good. I always had a question about the names of the people, but so they took that out. Now they're doing the maps. I'll share that. And then I don't think there's anything. The other robust conversation that took place was in my opinion, the Portland, Vancouver area comprehensive climate action. Uh, Conversation was really good. They did a great job of presenting um, that draft plan and sort of feedback and comments. Other than that, I think that's my update. I'll leave. I think I still have 2 minutes. I thought we were sticking to 3 minutes. Okay.
Commissioner Treese.
Thank you. Last Wednesday, I attended a ribbon cutting with Beaverton Chamber for the Bethany Massage and Spa business. It was well attended. That was cool. Friday morning, I attended the Beaverton Chamber's Coffee Connection chat to talk about both levies, the library and the public safety levy, and to share information package with the attendees there. The This week, I had a check-in with Chief Deputy Al Roque, we monthly check-in that we all do, but it was good to talk with him about the upcoming issues there. Later on Monday, I had a call with, I guess that was just yesterday. Sorry, with Beaverton City Councilor Kevin Teeter regarding library funding and governance, as was discussed earlier today. And I did mention to him that we were meeting today and to follow what our schedule will be.
Yeah, I had responded to his request by letting him know that we were having this meeting today and I wouldn't follow up with him until after we had a board decision. So
I think mine got scheduled a little earlier, but anyway. Yesterday, I did have a call with Clackamas County Commissioner Martha Schrader. We were talking about workforce development issues and looking at WorkSource Clackamas County and WSI looking at the entire workforce shed and talking about possible mergers in that regard, especially due to the budget situations that we're all facing. Tomorrow, I'm going to be attending the Job Resource and Career Expo at the Wingspan for a bit, and that's sponsored by WSI and others. And then I have a meeting with the AMR leadership tomorrow as well. In the evening, I'm headed to Metro for MPAC, and at MPAC tomorrow, it's all informational. There's no votes, but we are going to be going over an update of future vision. We're going to be talking about the Portland, Vancouver area comprehensive climate action plan, which I assume is what Commissioner Fye was talking about. And the last item on the agenda is place and health, the health impacts of the built environment. I will give a report when I return.
on the climate action draft plan, beyond what our staff already has in the work plan for LUT that we've adopted, if Metro wants us, same applies to the state. If they want us to do any work, they need to provide grant funding for us to do that work because we don't have the staff capacity to do any more work. Our staff are completely programmed out.
And as always, I talked with Jessica Pels today, and she mentioned that as well. And she will be available to me for comment if need be.
I know it's a tough message to deliver, but
I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah,
that's what we need. So
Last night at the city council meeting, they were asking what services we were expanding, and I just had to flip the conversation and say, we're not in that mode right now. We're just trying to figure out what we can still keep doing.
to underscore that, yes. Then Friday,
well, kudos to you. I think you dealt with it more gracefully than I have the opportunity to right now after so much budget cutting over the years. I need to take a happy pill.
Yes. So Thursday, I'm going to be at the Building Bridges event at the Muslim Educational Trust. I will have to leave that event around noon to make it in time to meet in Portland for the RWAC meeting where we'll be touring the City of Rose's transfer station. Friday, I'm attending the completion ceremony for the Affordable Housing Preservation Portfolio Project at the Holly Tree Apartments in Beaverton. I'm going to have to leave that event just a little early too because I will have the RDPO, the Regional Disaster Preparedness Organization meeting. And then I also have a call with Alicia Sojourner and Barry Johnson Smith, new co-chair, for our upcoming ACRE meeting on Monday, next Monday. Then finally, I am going that evening to Virginia Garcia's Prospera Gala. That's my report.
Thank you for doing all that. I know you are all very busy and doing a lot of things. Appreciate it. Thank you, Commissioner Snyder, for mentioning the ETV recognition. I stayed for the rest of the meeting. I continue to be impressed with that organization. And I shared some thoughts with Ms. Angie on what I had, a little snippet I had the opportunity to learn about AI and communication and Google's or just searches via AI tools. SHS is on my brain, partly because I've had both the Tri-County Planning Body meeting and the Oversight Committee meeting. The 3 county staff continues to do awesome work. Kudos to the Metro Council for having the quarterly reports, the last quarterly report going to their meetings recently. And Yesenia Delgado of Metro staff was giving the county staff kudos for the great progress that they've made in having consistent reporting and streamlined reporting, particularly when it comes to serving population A and B. A lot of really great conversation at that committee. I've let each of those committees know that we'll have a transition of board involvement in those committees. Through the Tri-County chairs, I learned that Multnomah County does their budgeting a little bit differently than we do, with the rigor that our staff does, led from Ms. Angie. We're pretty much in real time going through our final stage of adopted budget to where things are landing with the state budget. Multnomah County does it differently. They essentially have a proposed budget 6 months, not quite 6 months back. So they're having to invest a lot of work to go through a rebalancing effort with the state, just based on what was adopted in the biennial. And now we have further biennial reductions coming to all of us. The Multnomah County Commission has been having some work sessions to, amongst themselves, sync up on a reality of possibly having an SHS renewal in 2028, but ensuring that with the 3 counties, there's unified governance and respecting the county role. So I think sooner rather than later, we're going to need to have a good SHS sync up with our staff and look at how we navigate things moving forward. Whenever there is, or as there continues to be a proposal for changing the distribution model, for example, to follow the severity of the problem in either City of Portland or Multnomah County, I continue to remind folks that everything's on a downward trend financially, and that if we don't have the resources to maintain the nascent full system, in air quotes, full system, here in Washington County, that we'll have to revert to shifting folks over to where those services are in Multnomah County, which none of us want to do. So we need to continue to work together to figure out how we're going to navigate these very challenging financial times moving forward. It all just sounds like what it is, more work. It's hard, I know. So, but I'll work with Ms. Angie and her team to figure out how we can have those board sync ups coming up in October. So we've got a good view of where we stand, what we want to do as things move ahead. But I will send you some information. I'll also include it in the roundtable packet. There were some useful things articulated at the SHS meeting that I missed the end of June by Counselor Lewis when I was out for my mother's death. So I'll be packaging all that up in an easy format for you for us to sync up roundtable day. Okay. That's it from me. So great. Thanks everybody for accommodating tight time. We now have an executive session. I'd like to ask for a motion to adjourn to executive session pursuant to ORS 192.660 sub 2 sub E for the purposes of discussing real property negotiations. This is for Washington County. And then when we're done with this executive session, then I'll do all the formalities for Clean Water Services one.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please vote by raise. Thank you, commissioners. Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously. We're hereby transitioning to Washington County executive session.